As the world prepares for the Munich Security Conference on February 14 to 16, 2025, it is crucial to remember the catastrophic consequences of poorly conceived peace agreements. The Munich Conference of 1938 stands as a stark reminder of how misguided diplomacy can embolden aggressors and lead to global conflict. Hosted by Adolf Hitler and attended by British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, French Premier Édouard Daladier, and Italian dictator Benito Mussolini, the conference resulted in the appeasement of Nazi Germany through the cession of Czechoslovakia's Sudetenland. This act of diplomatic surrender paved the way for World War II and has become synonymous with failed peace efforts. Here are 9 scandalous, shocking, and fascinating facts about the 1938 Munich Conference, culminating in its devastating legacy. Number 1. Czechoslovakia was excluded from its own fate. One of the most infamous acts of diplomatic betrayal in modern history occurred on September 29 to 30, 1938, when British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, French Premier Édouard Daladier, German Chancellor Adolf Hitler, and Italian dictator Benito Mussolini met in Munich, Germany to decide the fate of Czechoslovakia without a single Czech representative present. The country's president, Edvard Beneš, learned about the conference but was not invited, even though it was his nation at stake. This was a crushing humiliation, as Beneš was forced to accept the Munich Agreement under immense pressure, despite previously seeking Western support. The Munich Agreement handed over the Sudetenland, a strategically vital region of Czechoslovakia, to Nazi Germany. This territory was home to over 3 million ethnic Germans, but it also contained the majority of Czechoslovakia's border fortifications, rendering the country defenseless. Czech citizens referred to the agreement as a dagger in the back, feeling utterly abandoned by Britain and France, their supposed allies. This historical parallel resonates today when major powers gather in Munich in 2025. Will small nations once again be sacrificed in the name of so-called peace? Number 2. Hitler wanted more than just Sudetenland. Though Hitler insisted in the summer of 1938 that he was only interested in reclaiming the German-speaking Sudetenland, later evidence revealed that this was a lie. In reality, he had always intended to take over all of Czechoslovakia. Operation Green, Fall Grun, a detailed German invasion plan, had been drawn up as early as May 1938, months before the Munich Conference. On October 1, 1938, German troops began occupying the Sudetenland. Many Sudeten Germans welcomed the Nazis with open arms, while tens of thousands of Czechs and Jews were forced to flee the region. However, Hitler was far from satisfied. On March 14 to 15, 1939, after orchestrating internal chaos and pressuring Slovak nationalists to break away, Hitler summoned Emil Hácha, the new Czech president, to Berlin. Hitler and Hermann Göring threatened immediate destruction of Prague if Hácha did not surrender. A terrified Hácha suffered a heart attack and was revived with an injection of stimulants before being forced to sign away his country's sovereignty. By March 15, 1939, German forces had occupied Bohemia and Moravia, effectively dismantling Czechoslovakia and turning it into a Nazi-controlled protectorate. Chamberlain's promise of peace for our time lasted only 6 months. This remains a stark warning for modern diplomacy. Concessions to aggressors often encourage further aggression. Number 3. Chamberlain's infamous Peace for Our Time speech. On September 30, 1938, Neville Chamberlain returned to London, greeted by ecstatic crowds. Waving a piece of paper that bore Hitler's signature, he triumphantly declared, "My good friends, for the second time in our history, a British Prime Minister has returned from Germany bringing peace with honor. I believe it is peace for our time." This statement became one of history's most infamous examples of naive appeasement. While Chamberlain believed he had secured lasting peace, Hitler saw it as a sign of British weakness. According to Albert Speer, Hitler privately mocked Chamberlain, allegedly calling him a worm for his willingness to yield so easily. Less than a year later, on September 1, 1939, Hitler invaded Poland, leading Britain and France to declare war. This serves as a sobering reminder of how world leaders can miscalculate threats, just as some modern politicians may underestimate contemporary geopolitical dangers. Number 4. Mussolini's fake Italian plan. At the Munich conference, Mussolini presented what appeared to be a compromise proposal to resolve the Sudetenland crisis. However, in reality, this so-called Italian plan was a complete fabrication. It had been written by German officials and merely handed to Mussolini, who then presented it as if it were an independent Italian initiative. The ruse worked. Chamberlain and Daladier believed they were accepting a balanced and fair plan rather than outright capitulation to Hitler. This deception demonstrated how major diplomatic agreements can be manipulated through propaganda and staged theatrics. The lesson remains relevant today. Diplomatic negotiations can often be carefully orchestrated illusions rather than genuine solutions. Number 5. The Soviet Union was completely ignored. One of the most overlooked betrayals of the Munich Agreement was the exclusion of the Soviet Union from the negotiations. At the time, Joseph Stalin had a military alliance with Czechoslovakia, signed in May 1935, which obligated the USSR to come to its defense if attacked. However, Britain and France, desperate to avoid war with Hitler, completely sidelined Stalin, refusing to invite the USSR to the talks in Munich on September 29 to 30, 1938. This exclusion deeply embittered Stalin and reinforced his belief that Western democracies were unreliable partners. Soviet Foreign Minister Maxim Litvinov expressed outrage, stating, "We have been deliberately left out of negotiations that determine the fate of Europe." Stalin's paranoia about a Western anti-Soviet alliance grew, leading to a shocking reversal. On August 23, 1939, the USSR signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Nazi Germany. This non-aggression treaty included a secret protocol that divided Eastern Europe, allowing Hitler to invade Poland without fear of Soviet intervention. Historians argue that Munich accelerated the road to war by pushing Stalin into Hitler's arms. The consequences were devastating. Poland was carved up in September 1939, and by 1941, Hitler turned on the USSR in Operation Barbarossa, launching the deadliest front of World War II. The Munich betrayal was not just a diplomatic failure, it helped shape the trajectory of the entire war. Number 6. Winston Churchill called it a total defeat. While British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain returned from Munich declaring peace for our time, not everyone was convinced. On October 5, 1938, Winston Churchill stood before the House of Commons and delivered one of his most famous speeches, condemning the agreement. "We have sustained a total and unmitigated defeat. We have passed an awful milestone in our history." Churchill warned that appeasing Hitler would only encourage further aggression, comparing the Munich Agreement to feeding a crocodile in the hope it would eat you last. His words were dismissed by Chamberlain's supporters, who believed Hitler's promise that he had no further territorial demands in Europe. However, Churchill's warning proved prophetic. Within 6 months, Hitler violated the agreement and occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia in March 1939. By the time Britain declared war on Germany in September 1939, Churchill's stance was vindicated. He was brought into the government as First Lord of the Admiralty and, in May 1940, replaced Chamberlain as Prime Minister. His speech at Munich became a defining moment in his career, one that showcased his ability to see the gathering storm of war when others were blinded by wishful thinking. Number 7. Czechoslovakia lost more than just territory. The Munich Agreement stripped Czechoslovakia of the Sudetenland, which contains 70% of the country's iron, steel, and electrical production. It also housed most of its border fortifications, leaving the rest of the country defenseless. With its economy crippled and military security gutted, Czechoslovakia was left at Hitler's mercy. This demonstrates that in international politics, territorial concessions often lead to far greater consequences. Number 8. France broke its own treaty. France had a formal treaty with Czechoslovakia dating back to 1924, pledging military assistance if the country was attacked. However, at Munich, France abandoned its ally to appease Hitler. French Premier Édouard Daladier later admitted, "We have betrayed a friend to avoid war, but in the end, we will have war anyway." France's betrayal damaged its international credibility and emboldened Hitler, proving that failing to uphold alliances only invites further aggression. Number 9. Munich led directly to World War II. The Munich Agreement is often misrepresented as a failed peace effort. In reality, it paved the way for World War II. By allowing Hitler to annex the Sudetenland without consequence, Britain and France proved they would not resist aggression. This emboldened Hitler, who invaded Poland in September 1939, forcing Britain and France into war. Munich remains a case study in how inaction leads to catastrophe, a lesson that must not be forgotten. Number 10. The aftermath, Chamberlain's downfall. The Munich debacle destroyed Chamberlain's reputation. After Hitler's invasion of Poland, Chamberlain had no choice but to declare war. However, his credibility was irreparably damaged, and on May 10, 1940, he was forced to resign, replaced by Winston Churchill. Chamberlain died of cancer just 6 months later, on November 9, 1940. His name remains forever associated with appeasement and diplomatic failure. The 1938 Munich Conference was a disaster that emboldened aggression and led to global war. As leaders gather in Munich again in February 2025, history offers a stark warning: peace at any cost often leads to greater conflicts. The lessons of Munich remain relevant. Are today's diplomatic strategies truly preventing war, or are they just another Munich in the making?